and my wonderful wife Lily and I have been married for 5 years. She is already 2 months pregnant, which is a very important moment for us since we've been trying to have a baby for 2 years. One day, Lily made me incredibly happy with this wonderful news. I'm sorry that I was in the dark for so long and did not notice the simple things. On one of my working days, 2 policemen came to my office and reported a terrible situation involving my wife. Perhaps from this moment, I will begin my story. I was sitting in my corner office, the windows of which overlooked endless rows of grey buildings. The rays of the setting sun pierced through the glass, playing on the keys of my computer. An evening plan had taken shape in my thoughts. Today, I resolved to pleasantly surprise my dear wife Lily. She truly deserved it, particularly after the trying months of her pregnancy, which had tested us both. We were eagerly anticipating the arrival of our baby, planning and preparing each day as if he were already with us. However, my contemplations were abruptly interrupted by a colleague's voice filtering through the slightly ajar door. "You've got visitors, guys in uniform," he exclaimed, curiosity evident in his tone. My hand hesitated above the keyboard. "The police, here for me." Rising from my desk, I headed toward the door and saw 2 policemen. They stood calmly, waiting for me to approach. One of them, who seemed older and more experienced, had a soft yet penetrating gaze. "Sir, we need to talk to you. Can you spare us a few minutes?" His tone was polite, but I sensed a note of seriousness. "Of course, come in," I replied, making way for them into my office. Having seated them and taken a seat opposite, I awaited further words. "We've come to you with unfortunate news. Your wife, Lily, has been hospitalized. She is in critical condition," the elder one started without preamble. The world around me froze. "What? How could this happen? She was at home on maternity leave," my words burst out involuntarily. I couldn't understand how my wife, whom I had left in the morning happy and healthy, suddenly ended up in the hospital. "Don't worry. She was taken to the hospital by a man named David Carter." "Do you know him?" the policeman continued. The name meant nothing to me. Who was he, and what was he doing with my wife? "No, I don't know him," my response was brief. My thoughts were jumbled, and I tried to gather them together to understand what was happening. Could he be a brother or a distant relative? "We just need to understand whether this was an accident or intentional harm," one of them said. "How could I ever harm my wife, especially considering we are expecting a child?" "I swear," I responded, and the policeman offered to take me to the hospital to find out the examination results. I agreed without hesitation. Rising from my desk, I took my belongings. One question spun in my head: what is even happening? As soon as we arrived, I literally burst out of the car and ran to the main entrance, barely listening to the police officer's instructions to follow them inside the hospital. The smell of antiseptic and medicine immediately hit my nose, causing me to hold my breath for a moment. We approached the reception, where the police officers introduced themselves and requested information about Lily's condition. The woman behind the counter, with visible sympathy in her eyes, picked up the phone to contact the department. The minutes of waiting stretched endlessly. Eventually, one of the officers offered a reassuring touch on my shoulder, perhaps trying to provide some comfort. "Your wife is in critical but stable condition. We can speak with the doctor to obtain more information, especially regarding Mr. Campos. He happened to be nearby at the right time and was able to bring your wife here. At present, we don't see any criminal intent in his actions," the senior officer explained slowly and cautiously, choosing his words with care. "How did this happen? Why was he nearby?" I questioned, my voice quivering with anxiety, unable to conceal my distress. "We are currently gathering information. Your wife is not in a condition to provide a statement, and we hope you can assist us in understanding the situation once she recuperates," the officer responded, his expression sympathetic. Just then, a middle-aged doctor wearing a white coat approached me, his demeanor composed yet his eyes betraying weariness. "Are you Mrs. Lily's husband? My name is Dr. Harris. Let us proceed to a room for a discussion," he suggested calmly. "I'll tell you everything we know." We walked into a small room with a couple of chairs and a table. Sitting opposite the doctor, I noticed his look full of professional compassion. "Your wife was brought here with severe bleeding. We did everything possible to stabilize her condition. Unfortunately, she lost the baby. She is currently under observation in the intensive care unit." "We tried our best," he said. "But why did this happen?" I asked. "We assume it's because of stress," he said. "Stress," I thought to myself, not believing this nonsense. I completely didn't understand what was happening. "Can I see her?" I asked, barely holding back my emotions. My eyes must have been full of despair because Dr. Harris looked at me with even greater sympathy. "Unfortunately, it's not possible right now. Her condition is stable, but we want to minimize any stress. You'll be able to see her as soon as she recovers a bit." His words were gentle but firm. I nodded, unable to utter a word. Emotions raged inside me, from grief and despair to anger at myself for not being there when it happened. It was hard for me to accept the thought that my future child had gone without ever coming into this world. Returning home, the evening enveloped me in gloomy silence. I decided to clean, trying to distract myself from oppressive thoughts. Approaching the trash can to take out the accumulated garbage of the day, I noticed something sticking out. It was something insignificant, but my intuition told me to pay attention. It was a packet of pills. I didn't know what the pills were for, so I decided to look it up on the internet. It turned out that these were pills for terminating a pregnancy. My heart instantly froze. Why we wanted this child so much? A tangle of doubts and suspicions began to form in my mind. Thoughts became disjointed and chaotic. I turned all the garbage over, hoping it was some misunderstanding, a mistake. But the evidence was there. Lily had taken pills to terminate the pregnancy despite our common desire to have a child. The decision came spontaneously. I needed someone who could help me sort out this chaos. That same evening, I hired a private detective, explaining the situation to him and showing him the found clue. His reaction was restrained, but in his eyes, I saw a spark of interest. "All right, I'll take care of it, but I'll need some time," he said, taking the package of pills. "And I'll need to know everything you know about Mr. Campos." I shared with him all the information and went home. 2 days later, the detective contacted me and told me more details about Mr. Campos, who turned out to be a colleague of my wife's. My wife was a teacher, and so was Mr. Campos. I immediately remembered all the times my wife stayed late at work or had unexpected meetings with colleagues outside of work hours. "Thank you, Mr. Stone. You've been a great help," I thanked the private detective and said that I would definitely call him if anything came up. The next day, Lily was finally supposed to be discharged from the hospital. Mixed feelings wrestled within me at the thought of meeting her. On one hand, I felt relieved that she was all right and could come home. On the other, I realized that she most likely had an affair with her colleague. Approaching the hospital, I noticed how nervousness grew with every meter. "Hello," she barely whispered when I approached and hugged her. It was extremely awkward. On the way home, we hardly spoke. Lily seemed lost in her thoughts, and I didn't know how to start a conversation about what had been tormenting me all these days. After we got back, I helped her settle on the couch, made sure she was comfortably covered, and had everything she needed at hand. Only after that did I dare to start a conversation. "Lily, is there something you want to tell me?" I began, not knowing how best to continue. She looked at me in surprise. "I'm not in the mood." "Is there a big problem?" "I'm very sorry that this happened. The doctor explained it was all due to stress." "But what stress? You didn't seem nervous, and overall, you were in a good mood a couple of days before this incident, and I would like to know more about David Carter." At the mention of that name, her face changed. "Dave is our new neighbor. He just happened to be nearby when I felt ill." "Please don't judge me harshly," her voice pleaded, filled with desperation. "I understand. After everything that's happened, I feel so powerless. I just want to understand, Lily. I want to help," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure, though I couldn't shake the suspicion that she was lying about Dave. "The best way you can help right now is by staying silent," she insisted, covering my mouth and silencing me. I acquiesced, realizing she had likely undergone a challenging surgery, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of culpability for everything that had transpired. Deciding not to confront her about my discovery in the trash bin, I resolved to wait until she drifted off to sleep. A couple of hours later, as Lily finally succumbed to slumber, I began to search through her personal belongings. In the bag she brought to the hospital, I found nothing suspicious except for a small pocket that closed with a thin lock. I pulled at it and discovered a deep pocket at the bottom of the bag, from which I took Lily's medical document that I had never seen before. It contained the results of a DNA test that Lily had secretly taken a couple of weeks ago, a fact I deduced from the date. With a trembling heart, I opened the envelope and began to read. What I saw on those pages turned my world upside down. The child was not mine. I realized that not only had my wife been unfaithful and gotten pregnant by another man, but she had also destroyed lives. It was a nightmare. Unsure of what to do, I first headed to Lily's former workplace the next day to meet with her boyfriend. I told Lily I was going to work but would be home late. Upon arrival, Mr. Campos' colleagues informed me he was on break, likely having lunch at a cafe across the street. Without hesitation, I crossed the road and spotted Mr. Campos at the end of the hall, sitting with a young student, engaging in a pleasant conversation, laughing and exchanging glances. I approached their table. "Good afternoon, Miss. May I have a moment to speak with Mr. Campos privately? We have a very urgent matter to discuss." Mr. Campos had no chance to object as the friendly student gave up her seat, and I found myself sitting across from my wife's lover. "Mark, what a coincidence. So glad to see you. It's just unfortunate that I have to leave now, otherwise, I'd be happy to chat," he said, preparing to stand up. But with a swift motion, I grabbed his hand. "Hold on, we've just started, Mr. Campos. I have just a few questions for you." Mr. Campos realized my seriousness and sat down quietly, not attempting to resist. I placed the DNA test documents right in front of him, ensuring he couldn't lie to me. "Maybe you can explain what this is." "Well, those are medical documents," he replied. "I'm not stupid. Don't waste my time and yours," I said. Mr. Campos had always been an inconspicuous man. I had seen him many times before but would have never thought such a person would dare to sleep with another man's wife. He was cowardly and somewhat naive. I was surprised that my wife had such poor taste in lovers. It only took a few minutes for Mr. Campos to lay all his cards on the table and tell me everything that had happened with my wife. As it turned out, it all started more than 8 months ago. Mr. Campos claimed that Lily was the first to show signs of interest in him, and after that, they began to communicate via social media, eventually meeting daily for pleasant conversations. Within a month of such meetings, their relationship became sexual, and they shared a passion. Mr. Campos knew she was a married woman but somehow fell for her. "Please, just don't kill me," he said, continuing to tell me about what they had done with my wife. He said they had sex in the library, in the bathroom, at his home while his parents were in the next room, in our house, and so on. He also showed me explicit photos that my wife had sent him. "You see, I didn't want it to turn out this way. I thought we'd have sex once and then forget each other, but things went too far. You probably won't believe me, but she blackmailed me, saying if I didn't come to her, she would tell you everything," he said. "Okay, what were you doing in my house last week?" I asked. "I came to your house because the DNA test results came in, and Lily was very upset that the child wasn't yours, sir," he said. "Upset?" I asked. "Yes, she was very upset, so she took a whole pack of pills," he said. "Strange, then why did the doctor tell me it was because of stress?" I thought to myself, realizing the doctor had withheld information from me. His days were numbered, but first, I had to deal with Mr. Campos. "So what happened in the end? Did you break up with her?" I asked him. "Yes, but she keeps writing to me," he said, showing me his phone with at least 23 messages from Lily and 5 missed calls. I realized Lily had invited him over to the house, wanting to apologize for her breakdown that day and her hospitalization. I read a small part of their conversation and realized that Mr. Campos was not lying to me and Lily was indeed the initiator of all their meetings. I was horrified at the thought of living under the same roof with someone for 5 years and not knowing them at all. I trusted her so much that I couldn't even imagine such a thing. While I was reading the messages on Mr. Campos' phone, Lily unexpectedly called his phone. Mr. Campos asked me not to answer it, but I told him to pick it up and agree to meet her. Mr. Campos looked at me in surprise but ultimately did as I said. He answered the call and put it on speakerphone. "Hi, Dave. Why are you ignoring me? I can stop being a nice kitty and become a fierce tigress," she said playfully. "Lily, I was just busy with work," he replied nervously. "I don't care. My husband is at work today, and I'm prescribed a relaxing massage, but I have no one to do it." "You know what I mean," she said, and I sat there in complete shock. It came as a real shock to me. "Yes, I'll be there in an hour," he said, and we ended the conversation. Mr. Campos looked at me with pleading eyes, as if seeking forgiveness. "Relax. We'll deal with her, and she'll leave you alone," I reassured him as we made our way to my house. Mr. Campos shared a humorous anecdote with me. He recounted how Lily wouldn't let him meet other girls and was always jealous of him, which came as another shock to me. Upon arriving at my house, I instructed Mr. Campos to enter exactly 15 minutes later. My plan was to burst into the house and capture on my mobile phone's camera the moment my wife would be engaging in an affair with another man. While Mr. Campos headed to my house, I decided to call a divorce lawyer and explain my situation. He assured me that he would prepare all the necessary documents, which I could collect the next day. He suggested it would be preferable if my wife voluntarily signed these papers. I agreed to give it a try. Time passed, and I switched on the camera before entering the house. As I approached the front door and opened it abruptly, I caught her in the act, kissing her lover. She hastily separated from him and exclaimed, "What the hell are you doing here?" The tension was palpable in the room when I sat across from Lily and Mr. Campos at the opposite end of the couch. Her gaze was filled with anxiety, and my heart pounded as if it wanted to burst out. "Lily, I know everything," I began, trying to keep my voice calm, but it trembled with accumulated emotions. She looked at me with her malicious gaze. "And that's all you have to say after everything you've seen and captured on camera? Don't you see that this man barged into our home and started harassing me? You should beat him up." She began to spout utter nonsense, and I realized she was slightly out of her mind. It was unpleasant to listen to her, but she was unaware that, following my lawyer's advice, I had also turned on the audio recording. "I found these birth control pills after you were hospitalized and the results of the DNA test." I slowly pulled an envelope from my sweater pocket, proving that the child was not mine. Her eyes widened in surprise and fear, looking at the envelope in my hands. "How can you explain this, Lily?" My voice sounded harsher than I expected. Mr. Campos sat next to us, in shock. It was hard not to notice that he was shaking. She was silent for a few moments as if trying to find the words. "What kind of forgery is this, Mark?" she began, her voice quivering. "Are you trying to frame me? Don't you believe that the child was yours? I couldn't recognize my sweet, kind, and sincere wife, Lily, who once meant everything to me, now drifting further and further away. What about the DNA test, Lily? How do you explain that? Or do you want to say that the doctor's seal and signature are fake?" The words burst out of me, and each one felt like a stab. Lily's mood quickly changed. She froze, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I thought I could fix it, that we could be happy and have another child. Dave started harassing me, and I got pregnant from him. He wouldn't leave me alone. He was blackmailing me. And if you didn't understand, that is sitting right in front of you." "What the hell?" Mr. Campos exclaimed. "Shut up. If it weren't for you, everything would have been fine." Lily lunged at Dave, starting to scratch him with her nails. I quickly pulled her aside, trying to protect both of us. "Stop lying. I know it was you who started harassing Dave and blackmailing him," I replied sternly. Lily stood in the middle of the room in just a robe, crying loudly, behaving extremely unnaturally, and it was evident she was not in her right mind. "Should we call the police?" Dave suggested. I attempted to approach Lily to calm her down, but she quickly broke free and ran to the kitchen, where she grabbed a knife and began threatening us. "If you believe that lying piece of crap, then I'm going to hurt myself," she started to manipulate. "Lily, what happened to you?" I began to carefully approach her while Dave was calling the police and ambulance. "Darling, put the knife down, and we'll figure everything out," I said, trying to calm her down. "Don't come any closer to me," she screamed at the top of her lungs, holding the knife in her hands and threatening to harm herself. I realized the situation was out of control, and something had to be done. "I loved you, and you treat me so lowly, thinking that I cheated on you." "I would never do that because I love you," she said. "I believe you, don't worry." I realized I was wrong, I said, getting closer, deep down hoping she wouldn't harm herself, but I had big doubts about it. "Mark, I would never harm your child, our child, but this child wasn't ours. It was that scumbag who constantly harassed me at work. You know me, I would never do anything against you," she said, and it was incredibly painful for me to hear all this. "Let's just sit down and talk like normal adults," I said, and saw red liquid appear on the knife's edge. Lily had apparently pressed the knife too hard against her skin. "We have nothing to talk about," she said, raising the knife above herself, and was about to strike when suddenly Mr. Campos, who had been sneaking up on Lily from behind, jumped out at the right moment and knocked the knife out of Lily's hands. We tied Lily in bed sheets, and 30 minutes later, the ambulance and police arrived, to whom we explained everything that had happened. I decided to postpone the divorce proceedings because a couple of days later, the doctor told me some unpleasant news. "Mark, your wife needs treatment in a psychiatric hospital. The fact that she terminated the pregnancy and the stress from you finding out about her secret affair exacerbated her mental illnesses, which require immediate adjustment. Unfortunately, we do not know how much time may be needed for rehabilitation," said the doctor, and Lily was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. I immediately informed her parents about this. Furthermore, I decided to pursue a divorce from her. A few weeks later, I initiated divorce proceedings against Lily, citing marital infidelity as grounds, supported by evidence including photos, videos, and transcripts of conversations with Mr. Campos. Additionally, I presented DNA test results that I discovered in her bag. Another factor I cited was Lily's admission to a psychiatric hospital. Ultimately, our divorce was finalized. Our assets were divided, and I allocated a portion of the proceeds from the house sale to Lily's parents, along with the evidence I had gathered, as they had initially opposed me. I sincerely hope to never encounter that unstable individual again. Can you believe it? 5 years of marriage only to end in such a nightmare. Just think, if she had done something to herself that day, I would have been quickly jailed. Don't even say. You really need to be more careful when choosing future wives, and even more so, mistresses. Mr. Campos received a slap on the back of his head for that witty joke. A year after this tragic story, we became close friends, often meeting at the bar. Lily remained in the psychiatric hospital, and I began to build new relationships, hoping that this time everything would work out for me. Second story, being the affair partner to begin with, I am very conflicted by this whole situation. Approximately 6 months ago, I became the affair partner for an older Japanese woman who I have been teaching English to here in Vietnam. This situation started when I first met her in my English class. I had stayed in Japan before, so we had an instant connection. While I couldn't understand everything she said, I was able to pick up her basic questions. From that first class, I knew she was special. She seemed to be such a kind-hearted person, but her mindset about many things was so different from my own perspective. We both were very open-minded, but our thinking about many things was very different. During the first few months, I knew I had a deep attraction to her, but I also knew she was married and had 2 kids. I felt I couldn't get between that. However, my feelings continued to get stronger over time. Mind you, we were not seeing each other outside of class at the time, just an hour and a half, 3 times per week. After those beginning months of knowing each other, she had to return to Japan for her kids' summer holiday for about 1 month. When she was gone, I missed her tremendously. I resolved that when she came back, I would try and take her out and spend time with her outside of class. When she came back, I ended up offering to drive her some places and then going out to eat. She was a bit confused by the situation, especially because I am much younger than her. After a few dates, I confessed my feelings to her. She responded that she was happy but confused. The next time I saw her, I ended up kissing her. Over the next months, we did many things together despite her situation. We see each other 4 to 6 days a week. Most of the time, we are just talking or going out somewhere, though we have sex as well less frequently than I would like, but it's necessary because of where she lives and I live quite far, and the scheduling thing. I have found out things about her that she hasn't told anyone, like how her husband cheated on her and lived with another woman, and that's what broke their relationship. She has really bad trust issues, even with me, because of this. I have also spent a lot of time with her kids. Both of them really like me, the older one more. We have become quite close. We had a pregnancy scare last month that almost broke us, but we stayed strong through that. To her credit, she has never wavered on her feelings with her husband. She sees him like a family member, and she doesn't want to hurt anyone, his family, him, or her family, by getting divorced. She is also worried about the kids. Due to his job, he has had to spend long periods of time in other countries, and so their children have had to spend long periods without their father. Just this last year or so, he has been much more present in their lives. She has said several times she feels I am too good for her. I am younger and have a lot of potential. I am educated, I have some money, etc. But I really don't care about these things. I only want to be with her. I have dated a lot of girls before, but I honestly have never met anyone like her. Several times, I have done things to try and let the husband know what was going on. I hate unresolved conflict. I wish things would just boil over, and we can pick up the pieces. I am very confident because of what I have done that he knows she is cheating with me, but he also seems to not care. He has refused to react at all. I don't foresee my feelings changing. I am unsure what the future will bring. Honestly, the whole situation makes me feel uncomfortable. At any time, she could leave and go be with him, and I know that there is nothing I can do about it. She seems somewhat satisfied by the situation as it is, and I have no idea if this will ever change. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon.